All right. How are you guys today? Sorry, we're sitting next to each other, so we're echoing, but my name is Ivy. I'm with the Siouxland District Health Department. I am one of the environmental specialists. I will talk to you today a little bit about wells and septics and the program that we have here, as well as the time of transfer processes and how it mostly affects some of you in your day-to-day jobs. I also do food inspections, water samples, and a couple other tasks as well. So next to me, I have, I'm just moving my screen, Laurel. Laurel is our new sanitarian, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Laurel Meyer. Like she said, I'm the new environmental specialist here at the health department. I will be covering wells and septic inspections, as well as pool inspections and tattoo and tanning facilities.
Hi, Jody Wesley. I've been here for 20 years, doing well septic and water testing for that long. So now I've moved up into the environmental division, and I do a lot of their sending out license and all their inspection stuff. Paperwork. I'm the behind the scenes paperwork girl, so nice to meet all of you.
Right. Yep. So Jody is the lovely voice that you probably talk to a lot on the phone. So, okay. So with that, if you don't mind, if you did not send me an email or register online, we can get your email here on the chat on the side. And then we do plan to send out, we are recording this, and we can send that out as well as copies of our presentation as well. So if you want that, please include your email in the chat. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start with my presentation.
I'm going to give you one. So I do want to, I just wanted to make a quick note that Corey Frank with the DNR he's also sitting in. So Corey will wave at you. He just happened to, I invited him, so he's happening to sit in on this presentation. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can always direct them to Corey for time transfer.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Here we go. Okay. So again, my name is Alicia. My role today is to talk to you about the Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program for Woodbury County, as well as very briefly touch on something that you're all familiar with. I will not go into it too much, but your requirements as a realtor when you help buy and sell a home. I'm going to talk about why lead-based paint was used, what is lead, the health effects of lead on children, our environmental investigations when there's a lead poisoned child, what we're required to do as a follow-up, and when we inspect the home. Very briefly touch on the realtor and home seller requirements, just so I can say I did my due diligence, and then I'll share some resources as well. So why was lead-based paint used? So I tell everyone that back in the day, 100 years ago, lead-based paint was the Cadillac of paints. It was advertised as durable, it was moisture resistant, it was washable, and it was also used as a drying agent. A lot of times when we go into the homes, in addition to testing the painted surfaces, we also test the woodwork, including, off the top of my head, baseboards where it hasn't been painted, it's just that woodwork. And that's just because it has been sealed with, it potentially could have been sealed with a lead-based sealant to help with that drying agent. I always like to share these pictures, these advertisements of lead-based paint that was used back in the day, in particular, the one that's on your left, where it says, "These walls don't just look good, they're yummy too." And there was actual flavored lead-based paint, like flavored ice cream. And the flavors were pistachio, cotton candy, lemon, and marshmallow. I also like to share this picture as well. This is courtesy. I got courtesy of the EPA. I got it right off the EPA website. But as you can see, the older the home, in particular homes built before 1940, almost 100% of the homes were built using lead-based paint. And then as you can see, as the years get newer, that the lead-based paint was not used as much. So what is lead? Lead is a poison. There is no reason that lead should be in your body. It's highly toxic and it can affect nearly all organ systems in the body. In addition to that, lead-based paint in homes built before 1978 is the #1 cause of lead poisoning here in the state of Iowa, as well as in Woodbury County. I always say a few years ago, there was national news made in regards to a water crisis in Flint, Michigan. And that was because the water that they used was corrosive and the lead pipes leached into the water. And I guess the one maybe good thing that could have come out with it is it did bring lead to the forefront, but unfortunately it took away really what the #1 cause of lead poisoning is, and that is lead-based paint in homes built before 1978. And then, yes, the lead-based paint is not used anymore. It was officially banned in 1978. And even in the 1970s and even in the 60s, it really wasn't being used as much as it was in the early 1900s. It really started to dwindle down before that. And like I said, the state of Iowa, as well as Woodbury County, have a high number of homes that were built before 1978. I'm sure you've seen them as you drive around town and in other communities, those older homes where you can see that the lead-based paint is deteriorating. And I just wanted to share some pictures. So the top left picture is what deteriorated lead-based paint looks like. It has that alligator type cracking. So when we go out and do an investigation at a home related to a lead poisoned child, and I see that paint, I can see it immediately either in the windowsills, on the front porch, whatever it may be, then we know that we have most likely an open lead address, and something's going to have to be done to prevent further lead poisoning. The picture on the right there, as you can see, for the most part, the paint is in good condition. But what we call that surface, it's a chewable surface. And as you can see, that children can also be lead poisoned on those surfaces just by chomping down and getting that lead-based paint in their systems. A few more pictures of an interior of homes, but it just shows again that alligator type cracking. You can see it in particular, the picture in the middle where it has those paint chips in the window trough, and what happens, whether it's paint on the thresholds or baseboards or whatever it may be, that lead dust or those paint chips turn into a lead dust, and then it stays in those window troughs, it gets onto the floor, and children play on the floor and they can become lead poisoned by that hand to mouth activity, where the lead dust falls on the floor, can get onto a blanket, onto their hands, onto a toy, pacifier, whatever it may be, and they become lead poisoned through that hand to mouth activity. Just a last picture slide. This is just pictures of lead-based paint outside. And the left picture there is lead-based paint that has fallen into the soil. The middle picture is of railings, and I do tell this story where I did a lead investigation of a home. It was an older home, but the property had been rehabilitated, new windows, new siding, very well done. But you go outside and they had railings pretty similar to the ones in the middle. And in addition to that, there were teeth marks that went about 3 feet up on the railings. And that is how the child got lead poisoned. And then on the right there, just more pictures of some deteriorated lead-based paint on the eaves and exterior of the property. So the health effects of lead on children. So as you can see, that top sentence, lead inhibits the bodies of growing children from absorbing zinc, iron, and calcium, which are minerals that are important to their brain and nerve development. Lead poison can lead to developmental delays, learning difficulties, lower IQ, and it's also been linked to ADHD. In addition to that, the CDC and medical research has established that early lead exposure can lead to criminal activity as an adult. And for children, the immediate health effects are typically neurological, in particular, like I said, the developmental delays. but it can even have problems later in life, hypertension, renal effects. And then in addition, adults can be lead poisoned. Anybody can get lead poisoned at any age. My grant focuses on children in Woodbury County up to the age of 6, but really anybody can be lead poisoned. So I say the reproductive problems because a lot of times, especially when women are pregnant, this is a time where they want to get the room ready. They want to get the house ready. They may replace windows. They may scrape some of the paint. Well, they also can become lead poisoned, and then that can also pass on through the blood to their growing baby and their bodies. And that is a problem as well. So awareness equals prevention. And I say this only because I hear it a lot from parents when I go into the homes because of a lead poisoned child. They just didn't know. They didn't know that lead was a problem. They didn't know that the paint in their home was causing their child to become lead poisoned. So just being aware that yes, lead is a problem. As long as we have homes in our area that were built before 1978, lead will continue to be a health problem. In addition to that, it's been found that even low levels of lead in the blood can have negative effects on a child's intelligence. The first number there, that's 5 micrograms per deciliter. The CDC just came out with that number. It's probably been a few years now. The number used to be higher, it used to be 10, but now they're finding lower levels of lead in the blood can also have effects on children. Oftentimes, children show no signs in those early stages of lead poisoning. Some of the first signs that we are told our children are easily excitable and they can't pay attention. And for those of us that have children, I feel like that's my children every single day. So those are early signs of lead poisoning. The only way to know for sure if your child is lead poisoned is through a blood lead test. And typically that's a finger poke initially. And then if that comes back high, it is recommended that the child gets a venous blood lead draw. And then we determine what's going on. And we have a better determination of what's going on from that venous blood lead draw. So like I said, childhood lead poisoning will continue to be a public health problem because we have a high number of homes in our area that were built before 1978. And as you know, these homes, just like me, aren't getting any younger, they're getting older. And unfortunately, you probably see some of these homes that have the deteriorated lead-based paint. And then also just the lack of public awareness and understanding about the risks of lead poisoning. Like I said, just again, children are most at risk for lead poisoning because it does affect their developing brains. The number one cause of lead poisoning is from that lead dust from the deteriorated lead-based paint that falls onto the floors or in the windowsills or on the bare soil. And it falls where children have access to, and that's on the floor. And then they ingest that lead dust through that hand-to-mouth activity. And I just wanted to share with you just a few cases that happened last year, January 1st to December 31st. We had a total of 10 cases here in Woodbury County, and I know that doesn't sound like very much, but 10 cases where children were lead poisoned where we had to do follow-ups. And when I say follow-ups, we were required to do environmental investigations, and then in addition to that, a nurse and a dietitian were sent out to the home as well. But 3 of those cases, those children's lead levels were so high that they had to be hospitalized and they had to be put on medicine. It's a chelation medicine is what it's called. And we are required to go out to that home within 2 days of receiving the report. In addition to that, the child cannot be discharged into their home. They have to be discharged into a home that's lead safe for them. And then also for those chelation cases, all across the state of Iowa, Iowa Poison Control is involved as well. And they have their toxicologists involved because of the lead poisoning issues at that high of a range. The other children, there were 7 separate children that had lead levels of 20 or above, where again, we were brought out to do environmental investigations, and also the nurse and dietitian, and we send a referral onto the AEA for a developmental assessment. But I put in red, bold, is that the common denominator that all of these children had is they either, number one, lived in a home that was built before 1978, or number two, regularly visited a home that was built before 1978. And that could be anywhere from a grandparent's house to a daycare provider. And then we investigated those residences, and all of those residences had deteriorated lead-based paint. So I'll just touch on real briefly. So an elevated blood lead investigation, what happens is we get an alert from the state, a child is lead poisoned, and we're required to go out and do an investigation of the home. When the venous blood lead draw is at 15 to 19, when there's 2 of them, or 1 venous blood lead draw of 20 or above. And then, like I said, a dietitian and a nurse from the health department also visit the home. And then we also are required to make a referral for a developmental assessment. So when I go out and do my environmental investigations, this is literally where I'm investigating the home. And my main goal is to find out where the child is getting lead poison from, and to separate the source of lead from that child. So we talk with the parents, we work with the parents. During the investigation, you can see that picture there is of an XRF machine that's very similar to what we use. But literally we can find out right then and there when we put that XRF machine against that surface to determine if it is lead-based paint. And then visually we have to determine if it's a risk. So if it's deteriorated, or if it's a chewable surface, or if it's in good condition. We do test everything inside and outside of that home. We test all the rooms, upstairs, downstairs, bedrooms, bathrooms, pantries, everything. And then also on the exterior of the home, as well as anything else that may be there, such as a garage or a shed or whatever it may be. If we find deteriorated lead-based paint, then that means it's an open address, and that's where you guys get involved. This is where, if it's an open address, as you know, you have to do the EPA lead disclosure, where you mark, yes, lead-based paint hazards have been found. And then in addition to that, all the letters that we send to the property owner also have to be included in that disclosure letter as well. And so we do send letters. We send letters within a week of the investigation. We send letters 30 days after the investigation. And then we also send letters to the property owner every year. And this letter is just saying, hey, you own an open lead property. What are your plans to get it fixed? And all those letters that we send, it does state clearly in there that they need to keep those letters. And then if they sell the property, that they need to share those letters with the potential buyer. And just real briefly, to close an address, so we open an address. To close an address, that's done by me and one other person here at the health department. But we do clearance testing. And just to give you a good idea, we do a visual of the property and to determine if there's no chipping or peeling paint. And then we go inside the property and we collect dust samples of the floors, windowsills, and troughs. And as long as the house passes those thresholds for those different areas, then we can actually close the home, and we deem it lead safe. We don't deem it lead free, we deem it lead safe. And we also send a letter when we're able to close an address. Again, I'm just going to touch on this real briefly. You guys all know these rules and requirements that you have to do, but again, the seller disclosure, the federal law requires that you have to provide that information to potential buyers, and that the seller also has to share that information with you as well. So again, the notification rule is that first bullet point. The second bullet point is that EPA approved pamphlet that you're required to give. And then also on that third bullet point is that 10-day period where a paint inspection or risk assessment needs to be or can be done if it's agreed upon. These are the resources that I use. As you can see, the first one is the EPA.gov. The second one is actually the new, it's no longer the Iowa Department of Public Health, it's the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services. So that's their new web address. And then also our website, siouxlanddistricthealth.org. So I'm just wrapping up. I'm done with my lead presentation, but I did want to share with you all that here at the health department, we do sell short-term radon test kits for $8. We do sell them year round. The cost of the test kits include the postage, the test, and the receiving of results. In addition to that, I also coordinate a Healthy Homes Coalition. We meet every odd month, typically on the third Monday of the month, but for the May meeting, we are actually meeting on the fourth Monday, so the 22nd. So if you're interested in being a part of the coalition contact list, or if you can attend meetings, please email me and I'll add you to the contact information list. One of my future goals is also to start a coalition specific to childhood lead poisoning prevention. And then if you'd like to be a part of that, please email me as well. So again, my contact information. But in closing, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being a part of this Zoom meeting. I am going to pass it off to Ivy. And then my plan is Ivy will do her presentation. And then after her presentation, we will open it up for questions.
All right. So I have this cough, so I apologize. I may cough throughout the entire presentation, so I apologize about that. But today we are going to visit a little bit about septic systems. I know you guys are probably more interested in kind of finding out what you need to know for time of transfer, but we'll go over the basics of that too. Sure, what's going on? Oh, there it is. Okay, so today I'm hoping that our communication will just give us a better understanding of what the law requires. We really are open to hearing your concerns, things that you guys run into on a day-to-day basis, and trying to come up with a resolution or how we can handle that process better. Because I do know that there's always things that come up. We know some of the issues, some of the things that we'll touch on is the limited amount of time of transfer inspectors. It's an issue that we're aware of, but we can't really control it. So if you guys, here's a quick plug, if you guys are interested, you can always become a certified time of transfer inspector. I didn't get any other volunteers throughout the day that were interested in doing that. So if you have any other specific questions that you run across in the future, give us a call. We would be happy to give you some information by phone or scheduling a meeting. Okay, so most of you probably have a pretty good idea about septic systems. However, I always get into situations where people who live in cities, they don't really know, because when you flush the toilet, it goes down the drain and it goes to the public sewer system. They don't have a private septic system at home to know how that's a little bit different. So we'll talk about its components, specifically time of transfer, things that you guys need to know. And then I do also want to touch base a little bit about the wells. We get a lot of requests about water testing, and so I want to give you some resources about our grants to counties program. All right, septic systems. When we talk about septic systems, we get questions day in and day out, but the goal of a septic system is to properly treat that effluent. So any of that waste that we flush down the toilet, so whatever you flush down those fixtures, it goes into your septic tank. We want that to be treated properly before it goes out into our soils. It gets treated, and then we take that back up through our aquifers and drink it. We talk a lot about what gets flushed down the toilets. So toilet paper is really the only thing that should be flushed down a toilet. You should not see, we should not have like dude wipes. Everybody's talked about the dude wipes and how much they like those. Those should not go down your toilet. Or should feminine products or washing what your kids throw down the septic system. You know, a lot of kids will have race cars or Barbie shoes. They do not belong in the septic system. If it's not properly treated, it's always a risk to us through the contact that we have. It's a risk to you, your family members, your friends that visit, animals that come in contact with that. And a lot of times, you know, some of the biggest concerns of where we're seeing those issues is things that are discharging right to the surface, causing some issues. All right, so septic tanks, and I have just a couple of basic slides in here so you understand how they work. So this is a septic tank. Like I said before, everything that you flush down the toilet goes into your tank. There are two compartments. You can see it comes in through the inlet. All of these solids are designed to settle to the bottom. We want them to settle, and then all of that effluent goes over to that second compartment before it goes out into the leach field. Oh, yep. So Corey, if you didn't notice in the chat, dudette wipes are becoming a big issue, creating expensive fixes, which is 100% correct. They cause lots and lots of problems and issues. So you have to remember anything that you put down, your septic system takes up capacity. So if you have a 1,250 gallon tank, the more product solids that you put in it, the less capacity that you have. The more capacity that you have without getting that pumped is going to cause the increase of a sewage backup in your house, which is not the goal. So our hope is that everything solid settle, the effluent goes out into that leach field.
You know, Ivy, this is Corey. I was gonna say that.
This is
you know,
just a nice image of what a rural residence looks like. We have our house, we have from the house, everything going to the septic tank. Here in your screen, that's with the two risers there. That's where that effluent, that's our primary treatment. It should be closed, it should be watertight. Nothing should be coming out of that before it heads to our distribution box. A distribution box, its sole purpose is to distribute the water equally. So it's going to come in there. The goal is to have the water fill from the bottom upwards. And then each leach line that you see with those black chambers, that is where we want equal distribution to each lateral. That the soils that we have in the ground, that's what's used to treat that effluent. You'll see that it's moving down through the soils before it gets into our aquifers and it's pumped back up into our well for drinking water. So it is really important to make sure that our systems are working to really protect you and your family members. All right, moving into time of transfer. So this is where it's going to mostly affect you guys. And we didn't necessarily go around the room and do introductions. Just because I know there's quite a few of you on the line here, but we work with homeowners, buyers, sellers. We work with realtors, we work with closing agents, contractors. We're working with a wide number of individuals where it all has to kind of transition smoothly when transactions occur. So any building, any building that has a private septic system has to be inspected. Doesn't matter if it's a home, doesn't matter if it is a business, a building, an event center, if it has a private septic system, it is required to be inspected. This was passed back in 2008, and the goal was really to find illegally discharging systems. So when properties were changing ownership, they really wanted to see and find some of those and bring them back up to code, so it wasn't creating that public health hazard. I'm going to tell you, we are not driving around the county just looking for illegally discharging systems. That's not our goal. If we do receive a complaint, we are following up on those, but not speaking it out. The next one here is probably one of the biggest items that I will talk about. Just because it's not up to code does not mean that it will fail. Okay, so the time of transfer inspection, it's a disclosure. So it's just like any other part of your house inspection that you have, it's a disclosure so that the buyer, the seller, everybody knows what the status of it is. If it's undersized, if it's missing pieces, those things do not necessarily fail it. There are certain things that do automatically fail, but that's the purpose of the inspection. We're going to look at that, review it, and then make a determination. We do work closely within the city of Sioux City. This occurs because we do have a lot of private septic systems within city limits, and when those have an inspection that fails, and they're within 200 feet of a city sewer connection, they are required to hook up to public sewer. So occasionally you'll have some of these situations that will come across. Completes. So this just kind of makes a note that once that inspection is completed, they have 10 days to actually submit that. Once it's completed, they have 10 days to submit it to our office, where we will review and then submit that determination letter. They are all online now. There might be a couple. A couple out there that are by paper, but for the most part, they're all online, which is very nice for us because we can actually read them. They're legible. We don't have to decipher their chicken scratch of what it actually states. And then I think, hold on here, I'm gonna find my. Oh, no. I'm having, can you find it in the chat there? I think there was a message that I missed. So time of transfers, once they are completed, they are valid for 2 years following the inspection. So if you had an inspection completed within that 2 years, they do not need a new inspection. This is also the same for a new system installed. So if that system has been installed within 2 years, that is valid. Okay, I'll come back to that. We do get the situation occasionally where someone will say, well, I've got an inspection. And say you're closing 2 days after the actual inspection, 2 years and 2 days following that inspection, it's 2 years to the date. So if you're closing outside of that, it doesn't mean that you started the process and have that in hand. It is from the time you close, you have 2 years following the inspection or the new system install. So keep that in mind when you're looking at some of those. Once it's been submitted, we will send that determination letter. So part of the process, we've had this happen. I just had it last week. Somebody had a time transfer inspection. We sent out that inspection and the determination letter, and it didn't get to the right person. So please be aware that when you're filling out the property information, put in a valid mailing address, put in an email address, something of where you specifically want that report to go. I don't know who it's going to. I'm only filling that out with the person who's listed on the forms. So make sure that you're submitting that proper information. We will make a determination letter. The other thing that I like to make note is the only thing required by law to transfer that property is a time of transfer inspection report. The determination letter, it's not anything that we can enforce. We use it as a process to inform everyone of what the determination is. We had passed out a copy of an inspection earlier, and even one of the gentlemen he was like, well, does this pass or fail? And so it is hard to sometimes make that determination, and that's why we send that letter. So our letter is not a requirement by law, but we do want you to read it and understand what the inspection report means. It's very, very important. One of the other things that we come across here, you'll see that if the system fails, so a time of transfer inspection report is completed, that system is failed. Okay, a lot of times we'll get calls saying, okay, we know it's failed, now we want a waiver for a future installation. That is not the purpose of that specific waiver, and we won't complete it. It skews the data that we have when we're actually tracking valid waivers, so we will not. We can visit with your lender, your buyer, your seller, whoever has questions about that, to let them know that only the inspection report is the requirement. Kind of talks about some of our other items here. The one thing that I didn't kind of cover, and in the last presentations, they had asked, like, what does an inspection really entail when they're going out? So time of transfer inspectors, they're required to go out, and there's requirements that they have to look out. And I'm just going to give you some really quick basics about what is required. But one, they should be verifying that all fixtures run to that septic tank. The kitchen sink, the bathroom sink, the shower, the laundry, all of those should be verified that they run to the septic tank. If they do not, that for us is something that has to be fixed. It's a failure. So they have to verify that. The second part is they're inspecting the tank itself. They want to make sure that it's watertight, it's sealed. They're going to give some additional information, but it should be pumped. So they should have someone pumping that tank to remove the effluent. A lot of times they can't even really do a full inspection without having that pumped to look in to the tank about some of the components. From there, most of the time they're digging up the distribution box that we talked about. They will hydraulically load the system. And so what that means is they're putting in so many gallons of water to verify if I put in water, does it go into the system and does it go out of the system, which means that it's still accepting the effluent, the soils are. So they'll hydraulically load that and use that information then to determine what the leach field is doing. Or it's an indicator, it's another tool that they use. So they will also probe the leach field. They'll take a probe, they'll look at the soils, is it dry, is it wet, does it have biomat, is there scent, is there starting to pool at the surface, lots of things that they'll look into. I'm gonna go back to a couple questions here, because I've got some here. Corey's helping me out. As a reminder, all septic tanks that were or are installed after 2009 require that lids have risers to the surface. So yes, that's one of the things that we do look for in their inspection report. They have risers to the surface and that they're in good condition. So sometimes we see that they have those concrete lids, and if they're chipped or cracked or damaged, that's something that they would replace. Julie had asked, can we ask that an additional copy be sent to the realtor along with the seller? So we will send it, but you have to put that information on there. So we don't have, I don't even know it's who's requesting it, but yes, as long as your information is on that form, we can send that out. The new TOT inspector using the database, but yep, can put up to 3 affiliates in the report and include the email address. So that's where Corey, I think, is responding to Julie's message. Can be sent to you just like the county receives it. Our letter, and yeah, Corey made this in here, our letter is sent outside of the database. That's getting sent directly to the homeowner. We will email that and send a hard copy. So that goes over inspection, kind of what they see as well. When we get into binding agreements, when we get into binding agreements, these are very, very specific waivers that are used for a purpose. So the first one is weather permitting. This is a binding agreement for future inspection. Right now, actually, we've got several contractors that are already working. So unless a contractor told me that there's still frost in the ground and they couldn't get it, I would likely say, yep, an inspection needs to be completed for a property at this point in time. As long as they can access and dig and probe, they can complete that inspection. Sometimes you'll have a wet spring where it's just so saturated that contractors, the inspectors can't even get their equipment in and out of the properties. So there may be a reason, something like that, where we would allow for future inspection. The future install, this is usually when someone knows that their system is failing. It's an old metal tank, it discharges to the ditch, they already know that it fails. And we will talk to them and give them their options, but sometimes we want to save them the cost of an inspection, and some of them are $1,500 right now to do an inspection. Save that $1,500 and put it into the installation of a new system. There's always a couple that people will call and say, should I do an inspection or not? And you'll ask a little bit more information. The house was built in the 70s or the 80s. Well, it could pass. I mean, we don't know, but that there's a higher likelihood of that failing because of its age. So sometimes they have to make that decision and take the risk of whether they want to have a future installation or they want to have it inspected. The future demolition, we don't get these very often, but sometimes they will have, hopefully this doesn't. If I lose myself on mine, I'm gonna have to hop on Alicia's computer here. My computer's saying it's gonna shut down any minute for a reboot. But future demolition, these are houses that they're gonna abandon, they're gonna demo, or they're remodeling, farmhouses that are just tearing something down. We do allow these, but they do have to be properly abandoned. So they would need to provide an invoice that was pumped. they would have to provide, likelihood and invoice of some type of fill material. So you think when they pump that, now it's an open, potentially an open pit. It's a hazard, a safety hazard. We want them to crush and abandon that, and then backfill. So you'll likely need some additional fill material to for some of those void spaces. We do not, I don't send out the binding agreements. They're on our website, but I will say 9 out of 10 times they're filled out incorrectly. So we will work with the buyer. The buyer is always the one who signs those binding agreements because they're the ones that are taking responsibility of this new property. We will inform them of their rights. It's a legal document that they have to follow. So we will complete that with them. They will get a copy of the original waiver. We do not keep that. That goes with them. So they take that with them. They give to you as a realtor, their closing agent. It goes to the recorder's office. We keep a copy, but if you're looking for that document, your buyer has it. Okay. So we want to make sure that they have that information. We'll always, like I said, keep a copy if they need something, but they have the original. And then making sure, this is like my biggest plug, read your inspection report. Read it, read your determination letter. If you don't understand it, give us a call. We will walk you through. It has a lot of information on what is in the ground. And so it's a lot of useful information for them. The exemptions, this is on the website. You can see here on the link that there are a list of time of transfer exemptions as well. This you'll see on your groundwater hazard statement. So when you submit that groundwater hazard statement, it'll say exemption, you put in your number. We usually have a lot of questions in regards to these exemptions. If you have questions, that's perfectly fine. Give us a call. The biggest one that we have is that lineal line of consanguinity. This means that on your family tree, you have to stay in your tree trunk. Okay, so we're not branching out. It is like your grandparent to your parent to the child. Not aunts, not uncles, not cousins. It is that lineal line of consanguinity, which allows that exemption. And then they would not have to have a time of transfer inspection completed. We have had a couple situations where they're exempt. The buyer still requests that they want a time of transfer inspection. Please be aware that if an inspection is completed, if it fails, you can't take that back. You can't say, okay, well, I don't want to submit it. Once that inspection's been submitted, we are aware of that. And now it is legally has to be brought up to code. So I'm not discouraging you against that, but I want you to understand that that has happened. And the individual wasn't very happy about it. So we can't change that. Once it's submitted, it's a document that we have. Any questions about septic's time of transfer inspection before we move on to water samples? If you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. We'll address them later. Otherwise, we're going to move on. So for water, for wells, we do get a lot of questions in regards to water testing. And some of it is asked, I think, by the lender. Some of it's just the buyer wants to know about their water sample. Okay, and yep, Corey put a couple of links, and I have some resources at the end too. So in Iowa, we have a grants to counties program. Every county across the state has a grants to counties program that you can utilize for private well water testing. We will test bacteria, nitrates, arsenic, and manganese. It is covered at no cost to you as long as we come out and collect that. It usually takes a couple of weeks, so you'll need to plan ahead. If for some reason you don't have that time frame, can't meet it, you want to submit your own water sample, you can do that to our laboratory. Just know that you have to cover the cost. I think it's $10 to $14 per test. So it's really what test that you want. But our office, our laboratory they can bill you for those services. On our website at the health department, we have a link where you can go in and submit a form. Once we get the form, we will call you, we will schedule it, we will come out and collect, and then you'll get your water results. Oh, look, I don't even have this updated. It should be bacteria, nitrates, arsenic. We will always talk to the homeowners about what to do if their water is not safe to drink. There are some additional funding sources through grants to counties that would help cover the cost of shock chlorination or well assessment by a certified well contractor. And we would always recommend this no matter what. The reason for is we have homeowners that just take a gallon of bleach and dump it down their well. We do not want them to do that. There are a lot of components in your well. If you've ever installed a well, you know how expensive they are. The components, they're metal. So if you dump bleach down, it's going to be corrosive. So these well contractors, they have equipment to shock chlorinate your well safely. There's also formulas that they use based on, your depth and your diameter of your well casing to determine how much bleach to put down. And the specifics of when you shock chlorinate, how long do you let it sit in the lines? When do you flush? When can you use it? There's a lot of information that could be dangerous to the homeowner if they're not following those guidelines. These are just a little bit about each type. So the bacteria, that testing is done in-house. Usually only takes 24 to 48 hours. They're looking at the coliforms in there. If it comes back elevated, then they'll complete that for further testing. But that's really looking at the presence of fecal contamination, whether it's human or animal waste. We run into this occasionally where I had a property last year where a mom called me and she had said, hey, I've got somebody's, this wasn't a well, but this was a septic discharging, but we had some water testing completed throughout this. She had her little boy had gone out, was playing in the yard, found a mud hole. So she said, I didn't think anything of it. We had I think it had either the snow was melting or there was rain. So he was out there playing in it until he came inside, and she said he smelled of sewage. So when they went out to kind of find out where he was playing, the neighbor had a pipe that was just discharging. It smelled of sewer. So we went out and actually collected a test. Normally the results for these should be 0. So you shouldn't have, you shouldn't have the presence of any bacteria in there. This one was in the millions. So that just shows right there the risk of your children or your animals or other people when people illegally discharge or your well's not properly secured. We talked a little bit about hiring a well contractor. There's lots of different treatment, but we will go over that with you as well if you have an elevated, if you have a water result that comes back high. Nitrates, we also do in-house. These are odorless, tasteless. A lot of times they're found in our area just because of the agricultural community that we live in. The biggest one that we see is the baby blue syndrome. So when you guys see water advisories or boil advisories from the DNR, you do always want to make sure that you pay attention to what type of advisory is. If it's for bacteria, we're going to tell you, yep, you should boil that before using for eating, drinking, washing, things like that. If it's for nitrates, and I had this happen last year, somebody just thought it was a boil advisory. Well, it wasn't. It was a water advisory, and they started boiling their water. Well, if you boil nitrates, it actually increases that concentration. It can be very, very dangerous. So if you've ever heard of like baby blue syndrome, moms who use faucet water, just their tap water, and then boil it thinking that's going to make it safe. It actually could be, like I said, very, very dangerous. Arsenic is another one. This actually gets sent off to the state hygienic lab. We do not test this one in-house. You can actually see in north central Iowa that they have definitely an increased elevated numbers there. They have done a lot of research over in their area, a lot of testing, a lot of things there. They've actually put some protective measures in for some of those newly drilled wells, but they definitely can be an issue, a health hazard. And so it talks about reverse osmosis or different things there that you can use for treatment. The last one is manganese. This one actually wasn't always in our water testing. And if you guys are ever familiar with manganese, you'll actually see it. It leaves like a sooty residue in your fixture. So like if you run water in a bathtub or something, you'll see sometimes it leaves black deposits, sometimes it leaves some staining. And so it really is a nuisance. And a lot of times if people are seeing this, they're not drinking it. And so that's why a lot of times it maybe isn't as much of an issue, but it is now, it does have an MCL, maximum contaminant level, of where they are concerned about that as well. So those are the 4 tests that we cover under our Grants to Counties program. The list here just has some resources for you guys, things that I thought would maybe be useful to you. So understanding your water testing report. We get questions all the time of, it says it's high, I don't know what that means, I don't know what I should do. It really has some good information. The second is a link to the county sanitarians. So every county has sanitarians that cover their territory. This is a live document. So it is, it's a great tool. So if you buy or sell properties in different counties, you'll have contact information for every county. The private septic systems just links back for some just basic information. The time of transfer contractors. Yep, and I'll come back to that. The time of transfer contractors, we only have 3 in Woodbury County. So plan ahead, plan accordingly. We know that it's an issue. I can't change the number of contractors, the inspectors that we have in our county. It's going to be difficult. And we understand that. We understand your frustration. You will have to probably look outside of Woodbury County. You're going to have to start going into neighboring counties. I've told my inspectors from neighboring counties to be prepared to have phone calls from outside their normal territory that they have. So when you search that, you can search by county, start searching Plymouth, Cherokee, Sac, Calhoun, all of those different locations, and plan ahead. That's my other thing that I really want you guys to focus on is when you know a property is going to sell, get that inspection completed as soon as possible. Get on somebody's list. Do not wait until your time of closing, because when you can't get that inspection completed, your closing date is going to be delayed. And there's really nothing that we can do about it. They have 10 days from the completion of their inspection to submit their report. So plan ahead. Plan ahead for that. The exemptions are listed on there, as well as the DNR's website. So there's a lot of good information. I think there's a couple questions. Okay, so for the water testing, normally if it's through grants to counties, we are just doing the 4 tests. If you want anything outside of that, iron, hardness, fluoride, sulfides, you can request that. Those are out-of-pocket costs, but normally when we test, we're going to test the 4 free ones without question. So I'm going to send out my presentation. So you will have the presentation. Feel free to share it, send it to others so that they have that information too. But everything should have a link in there when you go through the presentation to get you to the right website. Any other questions? Any other questions for Alicia? How about for Corey? So Corey, this is the only session he attended. So if you have questions, you can relay them to Corey too. He's always a great resource.
I have unmuted Corey, so if you have anything to add, please do so. And if you want to be unmuted, again, my technology skills aren't that great. So please send it in the chat and I can unmute you and you can ask your questions. So Corey, do you have anything to add?
Nope, I think you covered it.
We can't hear you, Corey.
Corey probably has to unmute himself.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Nope.
How about now? No.
No.
All right, I'm unmuted, but
Oh, there we hear you.
okay. It just maybe took a little delay there. So No, I think you covered it all. I mean, I added some of those resources into the chat. Again, I guess the big thing is if you're not familiar with the new time and transfer database, get it, make yourself familiar as a realtor. There you don't have to necessarily, I mean, you can access that general public at any time and search by for an inspection. So if you've got a TOT that's been done and you're waiting on it, and they did not, like I indicated in the chat, added your email to the affiliate, so you get a direct email, you can always search in there at any time. You can do a general search by county, inspector, name, address. I would probably recommend doing it by county in case somebody spelled the name wrong. So again, that's there, and the more people using it, the better. Something else to just there isn't any recorders on this line here today. I did speak to the Iowa Recorders Association and at ISAC last week. I think it was last week. It's been I can't remember, my time's blending together here, but talking about the groundwater hazard statement and what needs to be attached to it, and basically inform them that they can attach the entire report. So it's a little different now than it used to be, the old paper form. We have a new format, or there's a document, a certificate within that time of transfer inspection. It's called a certificate of completion. It's a one-page piece of paper, or one pager, that basically documents the time, well, not the time, but the place, date, who it was, the inspector, address. So our DNR legal team feels that that suffices the what's required to be attached to the groundwater hazard statement to suffice for the time and transfer report. So that's just some little tidbits. But again, use that database, and again, work with Ivy if you have questions about what determinations. And again, we're still working on training for our TOT inspectors. Again, some of them are obviously more skilled in their writing techniques than others. I'll put it that way. We have some Mark Twains and we have some Shania Twains out there. So again, if you don't have enough information, then ask. And trust me, I'm working on making sure that they again do a better job. We didn't create this new system to have them do some of the old stuff that they were doing, good, bad, or ugly. So again, and again, if you're a realtor or anybody that knows somebody that's talked about, hey, I should become a time and transfer inspector, then encourage them to do so. Our next class is actually here in the middle to end of April. So, and if they don't have any experience, that's fine. There's a basics of on-site class I think it's like a week before. They take that class, then they take the other, they can become an inspector in the next month. So if you know anybody that's interested, push them to do so. And, that'll also help out in your region. And I understand that. And again, something too, I want to bring out today, and right now it did, as of this afternoon here, about half an hour ago, there was a bill that was introduced this year. It did pass in the House this afternoon, 94-0. The Senate has not taken up the bill yet. If they do, it would become law, because right now it's just a bill. Just want to make sure it's not in law yet. One of the things that was part of that bill is dealing with fraudulent activity. So again, in the bill, if there is a time of transfer inspector, a certified inspector that performs some kind of fraudulent activity as part of their inspection, they, according to the bill, if it becomes law, will be subject to a $5,000 civil penalty. So, I mean, again, we're trying, again, that's why we encourage our inspectors to do a thorough job, because when they don't, sometimes these things happen, whether it's a lawsuit or legislative action. Now, I'm not saying this is not necessarily a bad thing with this penalty. And again, if we have inspectors that aren't doing what they're supposed to or knowingly doing things they're not supposed to, then we need to make sure we can punish them accordingly. So, or weed that out. So again, that's probably the only other thing I want to add, Ivy. And if anybody on the call that wants to talk specifics about some of the training and whatnot, get a hold of me. I'll put my info in the chat, or again, you can find it on those websites that I put the links up to, and Ivy did too. So I appreciate the time and let me hang out here today. So sorry I couldn't make it there. I was going to, but I was double booked today. So I had to do a training at DMAC today for qualified samplers, a whole nother program, general
That's great.
permit
I'm
number
glad you
4.
could join via Zoom.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any other questions for myself or for Alicia and her lead presentation? Otherwise, we will let you guys go. We will send out a copy of, I for sure will send out a copy of my presentation. If Alicia has hers, I can send that out as well. Otherwise, our contact information is in the presentation. I'm actually going to include, before we had business cards, so it was a little bit easier, but I will include Laurel's contact information. At this point, she is just a week into her new position, so she probably won't have a whole lot of answers for you, but in the future, she will be a great resource for you. So we'll put that information in there as well. And like I said, if you guys have questions, I know Alicia is the same way. If you have questions, comments, concerns about any of our programs, we encourage you to reach out. We would rather walk you through the situation instead of everyone struggling through some of those difficult ones. Oh, hold on, we might have a couple of messages. Oh, Alicia puts our emails in the chat box there if you know. Okay. All right, well, that's all we have for today. Thank you guys so much for attending. Hopefully you learned something new.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.